The asteroid looked dead from the outside. Just another chunk of rock drifting through space, one of millions in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. But deep inside, buried beneath kilometers of stone and ice, the USS Defiance was coming to life. Lieutenant Katie Brooks had lived aboard the Defiance for 3 years. She had trained, eaten, slept, and dreamed inside its metal walls. She knew every corridor, every access panel, every weapon system. And now, for the first time, she was going to use that knowledge for real. The ship's lights flickered on, row by row, as power flowed through systems that had been dormant for months. Katie stood at her station on the bridge, running diagnostics on the navigation computer. Around her, the crew moved with quiet efficiency. No one spoke unless necessary. They all knew what was happening. They all knew what was at stake. Commander Daniel Reyes appeared on the main view screen, his face calm and steady. All ships, this is Forge 1. We have received orders from Admiral Holloway. Operation Sunrise is now active. Begin launch preparations. Katie felt her heart beat faster. Operation Sunrise. The plan they had studied and practiced 1,000 times. The plan to defend Earth from alien invasion. It had always seemed like a distant possibility, something that might happen someday, maybe never. Now it was real. The Defiance was one of 2,000 human warships scattered across the solar system. They had been built in secret over 4 decades, hidden in places the Voldari would never think to look. Some were buried in asteroids, like the Defiance. Others sat in craters on the dark side of the moon. A few were frozen beneath the ice of Europa, waiting in the cold darkness. The ships were not beautiful. They were not elegant. They were machines of war, designed for one purpose: to kill. Their hulls were thick and angular, covered in armor plating that could survive nuclear blasts. Their weapons were brutal and efficient. Railguns that fired metal slugs at incredible speeds. Lasers powered by small nuclear reactors. Missile tubes, loaded with warheads that could crack a planet's crust. Katie finished her diagnostics and reported to Captain Henry Morgan, the Defiance's commander. He was a tall man with gray hair and steady hands. He had waited 20 years for this day. "Navigation is ready, sir," Katie said. "All systems green." Captain Morgan nodded. "Good work, Lieutenant. Take us out." The asteroid began to split open. Massive doors, disguised as natural rock formations, slid apart to reveal the void of space. The Defiance's engines glowed blue as they powered up, pushing the ship forward into the darkness. All across the solar system, the same scene played out. Ships emerged from their hiding places like predators waking from sleep. They formed into squadrons and battle groups, moving toward Earth with deadly purpose. The humans had spent 50 years preparing for this moment. They were ready. On Forge 1, Commander Reyes coordinated the fleet's movement. Hundreds of screens surrounded him, each showing a different ship, a different captain, a different piece of the puzzle. The timing had to be perfect. If the Voldari detected them too early, the element of surprise would be lost. "All ships report launch successful," his aide announced. "Fleet is moving to Rally Point Alpha." Reyes studied the tactical display. The Voldari Armada was still in orbit around Earth, arranged in a defensive formation around their command ship, the Eternal Dominion. They weren't expecting an attack. Why would they? Their sensors showed a primitive world with no space fleet, no advanced weapons, nothing that could threaten 12,000 warships. The Voldari had made a terrible mistake. They had believed what they wanted to believe. They had seen humanity's public face, the rockets and satellites that any species could build, and assumed that was all there was. They hadn't looked deeper. They hadn't searched harder. They had been arrogant, and arrogance was about to cost them everything. Back on Earth, Admiral Holloway watched the clock counting down. Secretary Cole had done his part, begging the Voldari for mercy, promising to consider their terms, playing the role of a desperate leader facing extinction. The aliens had laughed at him. They had mocked humanity's weakness. They had no idea that every minute of delay brought the human fleet closer. Grace thought about the men and women aboard those ships. Many of them had given up normal lives to serve in secret. They had no families, no public records, no existence outside the fleet. They were ghosts, invisible soldiers who had trained for a war they hoped would never come. Now they were flying toward the greatest battle in human history. The communication panel beeped. A face appeared on the screen. Captain Amy Nguyen, commander of the weapons platform network hidden among Earth's satellites. Admiral, all platforms are online and ready, Amy reported. 300 antimatter warheads standing by. Grace nodded. Hold position until you receive my signal. Don't fire until the fleet engages. Understood. We'll be ready. The antimatter. Weapons were humanity's secret weapon within a secret weapon. Even most of the fleet didn't know they existed. Each warhead contained a tiny amount of antimatter suspended in magnetic fields, waiting to be released. When antimatter touched normal matter, both were destroyed in an explosion of pure energy. A single warhead could vaporize a kilometer-wide ship. 300 of them could change the course of the battle. But they were a one-time weapon. Once used, the enemy would know about them. They had to be deployed at exactly the right moment, when they could do the most damage. Grace had planned this moment for years. She knew exactly when to strike. On the Defiance, Katie Brooks ran final checks on her fighter. She was a pilot as well as a navigation officer, trained to fly the small attack craft that would swarm around enemy ships like angry wasps. Her fighter was called the Hornet, and it was fast, agile, and armed with missiles that could punch through alien shields. She climbed into the cockpit and sealed her helmet. Around her, other pilots did the same. There were 20 fighters aboard the Defiance, and they would all launch when the battle began. All pilots, this is Captain Morgan, the cum crackled. You know why we're here. You know what we're fighting for. Those aliens up there think we're nothing. They think we'll roll over and die. Let's show them how wrong they are. Katie smiled despite her fear. She had been born for this. Every hour of training, every simulation, every sacrifice had led to this moment. She was about to fight for humanity's survival. The fleet approached Rally Point Alpha, gathering strength for the attack. 2,000. Ships, armed and ready, crewed by men and women who were willing to die for their world. The Valdari had no idea they were coming. High Commander Zethrael received another message from Earth. More begging, more pleading. He barely listened. The humans were already defeated. They just didn't know it yet. In a few hours, he would land his troops and begin the occupation. Earth would fall like all the others. He looked at the tactical display, showing his 12,000 ships surrounding the blue planet. It was a beautiful sight. The sight of absolute power. The sight of inevitable victory. He didn't notice the faint signals at the edge of the solar system. He didn't see the human fleet approaching like a storm on the horizon. He didn't understand that his empire was about to learn a terrible lesson. Humanity was coming, and humanity was angry. The stars disappeared one by one. At first, the astronomers thought it was a glitch in their equipment. Then the reports started coming from every observatory on Earth. Something was blocking the sky. Something massive. Admiral Grace Holloway was eating dinner with her daughter when her phone rang. The voice on the other end belonged to General Marcus Webb, and he sounded afraid. Grace had known Marcus for 20 years, and she had never heard fear in his voice before. He told her to come to the Pentagon immediately. He told her the world was about to change. Grace kissed her daughter goodbye and drove through the night. By the time she reached Washington, the news had broken. Every television channel showed the same impossible image. Thousands of alien ships hung in orbit around Earth, so many that they formed a dark ring visible from the ground. The count kept rising as more ships arrived. 10,000. 11,000. 12,000. The Pentagon's emergency bunker was chaos. Military leaders from every branch crowded around screens, shouting orders and demanding answers. Grace pushed through them and found her seat at the main table. Secretary of Defense Nathan Cole stood at the head, his face gray and tired. "They've made contact," Nathan said. "They call themselves the Voldari Empire. They've conquered 17 star systems, and they want us to surrender." He pressed a button, and an alien face appeared on the main screen. It was almost human, but wrong in subtle ways. The skin was pale blue, the eyes too large, the mouth too wide. When it spoke, the voice was cold and mechanical, translated by some unknown technology. "I am High Commander Zethral of the Voldari Imperial Fleet. Your world is now under our control. You have 6 hours to surrender all military forces and submit to Imperial rule. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your species. This is your only warning." The transmission ended. The room fell silent. Grace looked at the faces around her. She saw fear, despair, and hopelessness. These were the most powerful military leaders on Earth, and they had no idea what to do. Humanity's most advanced weapons were toys compared to technology that could cross the stars. But Grace knew something they'd the eye. The end single quotes T. She stood up and walked to the front of the room. Every eye turned to her. "I need to speak with Secretary Cole alone," she said. "Everyone else, please leave." There were protests, angry voices demanding to know who she thought she was. But Nathan raised his hand, and the room slowly emptied. When the door closed, Grace sat down across from him. "You know about Project Icarus," she said. It wasn't a question. Nathan's eyes widened. "That's a myth. A conspiracy theory. It's real. I've been running it for 15 years. Grace pulled a small device from her pocket and placed it on the table. A hologram appeared, showing a map of the solar system. Red dots marked dozens of locations, hidden among asteroids and lunar craters, beneath the ice of distant moons. "We have a fleet, Nathan. 2,000 ships, armed and ready." Nathan stared at the hologram. His hands were shaking. How is this possible? The budget, the resources, the secrecy. 50 years ago, we detected our first alien signal. Not the Voldari. Someone else far away. The message was a warning. It said the galaxy was dangerous, full of empires that conquered and destroyed. It said we should hide our true strength until we were ready. Grace's voice was steady. "We've been building ever since. Secret factories on the dark side of the moon. Shipyards inside hollowed asteroids. Everything hidden, everything quiet. We let the aliens watch our rockets and satellites and think we were primitive. We wanted them to underestimate us." Nathan sat back in his chair. 2,000 ships against 12,000. Those odds are still impossible. The odds don't matter. What matters is that we fight. Grace leaned forward. "The Voldari expect us to surrender. They expect us to be afraid. If we show them we're willing to die rather than submit, if we hurt them badly enough, they might decide Earth isn't worth the cost. And even if we lose, we'll show the galaxy that humanity doesn't go quietly." Nathan was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "What do you need?" "Time. I need to contact our fleet commander and coordinate the attack. The Voldari gave us 6 hours. I need you to buy me more." "How?" Grace smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Beg. Plead. Tell them we're discussing surrender. Make them think we're weak and scared. Let them enjoy their victory before we take it away." Nathan stood up. He looked older than he had an hour ago, but there was something new in his eyes. Determination. "I'll do it. God help us all, but I'll do it." While Nathan prepared his response to the aliens, Grace made her way to a secure communication room deep beneath the Pentagon. She entered a code that only 3 people on Earth knew and waited. A face appeared on the screen. Commander Daniel Reyes, 42 years old, born in Texas, trained in secret since he was 18. He commanded the hidden fleet from Forge 1, an orbital station disguised as space debris. "Admiral," Daniel said, "we've been watching the Voldari arrive. My crews are ready." "Then it's time," Grace replied. "Begin waking the fleet. I want every ship powered up and ready to move within 4 hours." Daniel nodded. "The crews have trained for this their whole lives. They won't let you down. I know they won't." Grace paused. "Daniel, I won't lie to you. Many of us won't survive this. But if we do nothing, humanity dies anyway. At least this way, we die fighting." "Understood, Admiral." Forge 1 out. The screen went dark. Grace sat alone in the silent room, thinking about her daughter, about all the children on Earth who were looking up at the sky and seeing darkness instead of stars. She thought about the generations of scientists and soldiers who had worked in secret, building humanity's hidden strength, never knowing if it would be needed. It was needed now. Above the Earth. High Commander Zethro watched the planet with satisfaction. His sensors showed primitive chemical rockets, simple satellites, nothing that could threaten his fleet. The humans were sending a response, begging for more time to discuss terms of surrender. Pathetic, but amusing. He granted them 2 extra hours, enjoying their fear. He had conquered 11 worlds. Earth would be the 12th. Another jewel in the crown of the Valdari Empire. The humans would serve as workers and slaves, their planet stripped of resources. It was the natural order of things. The strong ruled, the weak submitted. Zethro had no way of knowing that deep in the asteroid belt, deep in the craters of the moon, deep in the ice of distant moons, 2,000 warships were waking from their long sleep. Humanity's secret fist was about to strike. The countdown had begun. The first warning came too late. A Voldari sensor officer noticed something strange on his screen. Energy signatures where there should be none. Movement in the empty spaces between planets. He opened his mouth to report it, but before he could speak, the human fleet arrived. They came from everywhere at once. Ships burst out of asteroid fields, rose from lunar craters, emerged from the rings of Saturn. 2,000 warships appeared in perfect coordination, surrounding the Voldari Armada like wolves circling prey. The element of surprise was complete. High Commander Zethro stared at his tactical display in shock. Moments ago, he had been planning the occupation of Earth. Now his fleet was under attack by an enemy that wasn't supposed to exist. His officers shouted questions and demands, but he had no answers. Everything he thought he knew was wrong. "All ships, defensive formation." He roared, "Target the human vessels. Destroy them all." The Voldari fleet responded, but they were confused and unprepared. Human ships struck first, firing railguns that launched metal slugs at a fraction of the speed of light. The slugs tore through alien shields like they were made of paper. Explosions bloomed across the Voldari formation as ship after ship was hit. On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Morgan watched the battle unfold. "All batteries, fire at will," he ordered. "Launch fighters." Katie Brooks felt the launch catapult throw her Hornet into space. She pulled hard on the controls, diving toward a Valdari destroyer that was twice the size of her entire ship. Her squadron followed, 20 fighters moving as one. "Target the engines," she said over the comm. "Disable, don't destroy. Let them drift." The Voldari destroyer tried to track the small human fighters, but they were too fast, too agile. Katie dodged energy beams that would have vaporized her, weaving through a storm of fire. She lined up her shot and pressed the trigger. Her missiles struck the destroyer's engine array, and the massive ship went dark, powerless and helpless. First kill. A wingman shouted. Nice shooting, Brooks. But there was no time to celebrate. The battle was just beginning. Commander Reyes coordinated the attack from Forge 1, his eyes moving constantly across dozens of screens. The human fleet was doing better than expected. The Voldari had numbers, but they were fighting an enemy they didn't understand. Human ships were smaller, faster, and crewed by men and women who had trained their entire lives for this moment. The railguns were devastating. The Voldari had never faced kinetic weapons before. Their shields were designed to stop energy beams, not physical projectiles traveling at incredible speeds. Every hit was a killing blow, but the Voldari were adapting. Their commanders began organizing counterattacks, using their superior numbers to overwhelm individual human ships. Reyes watched as the cruiser Independence was surrounded by 6 Voldari destroyers. It fought hard, destroying 2 of them before it was torn apart. We're losing ships too fast, his aide warned. At this rate, we'll be destroyed within the hour. Reyes nodded grimly. He had expected this. 2,000 against 12,000 was never going to be easy. They needed to hurt the Voldari badly enough that they would retreat. They needed to make the cost of conquest too high. Signal the fleet, he said. Concentrate fire on their command ships. Cut off the head, and the body will die. The human ships changed tactics, ignoring smaller Voldari vessels and pushing toward the Eternal Dominion. The flagship where High Commander Zethral watched the battle in growing panic. Katie Brooks found herself in the middle of the push. Her fighter squadron had been joined by others, nearly 100 small craft, forming a swarm that moved through the Voldari fleet like a knife. They targeted weapons, engines, communication arrays. Anything that would reduce the enemy's ability to fight. She lost count of how many ships she disabled. She lost count of how many times she nearly died. An energy beam missed her cockpit by meters. A piece of debris punched through her wing. Her shields failed, came back, failed again. She kept flying. Brooks, you've got 3 on your tail. Someone shouted. She pulled up hard, looping over and behind her pursuers. Her last missile took out 2 of them. The third was destroyed by her wingman, who appeared from nowhere to save her life. Thanks, Collins, she gasped. Buy me a drink when this is over, he replied. If they survived. The word hung unspoken in the air. On Earth, Admiral Holloway watched the battle through satellite feeds. The human fleet was performing miracles, but it wasn't enough. For every Voldari ship they destroyed, they lost one of their own. The math didn't work. They were going to lose. She opened a channel to Captain Amy Nguyen. How long until the antimatter weapons are in optimal position? 15 minutes, Amy replied. The Voldari are bunching up around their command ship. When they're tight enough, we can take out thousands of them in a single strike. 15 minutes. An eternity in a battle like this. Holloway clenched her fists and watched her people die. High Commander Zethral had never experienced anything like this. His fleet was the pride of the Voldari Empire, veterans of a dozen conquests. They were being torn apart by primitives. Primitives with weapons they shouldn't have, tactics they shouldn't know, courage they shouldn't possess. How? He demanded. How did they build a fleet? Our sensors showed nothing. His science officer shook his head helplessly. They must have hidden them, underground, inside asteroids, places our sensors couldn't reach. They've been preparing for years, maybe decades. The humans had tricked them. They had pretended to be weak while building their strength in secret. It was exactly what the Voldari would have done in their position. Zethral felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Respect for his enemy, but respect didn't mean surrender. He still had 10,000 ships. The humans had fewer than 1,500 left. If he could reorganize his forces, he could still win. All ships form defensive sphere around the Eternal Dominion, he ordered. Make them come to us. We'll crush them with numbers. The Valdari fleet began to contract, pulling together into a tight formation. It was a classic defensive tactic. Concentrate your forces, protect your command structure, and let the enemy break themselves against your wall. Commander Reyes saw it happening and smiled. The Valdari were doing exactly what he wanted. They were grouping together, making themselves a single target. Admiral Holloway, he said over the secure channel. The fish are in the net. Grace nodded. The moment had come. She turned to the communication panel and spoke 2 words. Launch Sunrise. In orbit around Earth, 300 satellites revealed their true nature. Hidden weapons platforms opened their launch bays, and antimatter warheads streaked toward the Valdari formation. Zethro saw them coming. His sensors screamed warnings about unknown energy signatures, impossible radiation levels, weapons that couldn't exist. He tried to order evasive maneuvers, but his fleet was too tightly packed. They had nowhere to go. The first warhead struck a Valdari cruiser and detonated. A sphere of pure white light expanded outward, consuming everything it touched. Matter and antimatter annihilated each other, releasing energy on a scale the Valdari had never witnessed. Then the second warhead hit, and the third, and the 10th, and the 100th. The center of the Valdari formation became a sea of fire. Ships vanished by the dozen, then by the 100. The explosions merged into a single wall of destruction that swept through the alien fleet like the wrath of God. Katie Brooks shielded her eyes as the light filled her cockpit. Even with filters, it was almost blinding. When she could see again, she stared in disbelief. Where 10,000 Valdari ships had been, there were now fewer than 3,000. The rest were gone, vaporized in an instant. The battle had changed completely. The humans were now the ones with superior numbers. On the Eternal Dominion, Zethro watched his fleet die. Alarms screamed. Damage reports flooded in. 7,000 ships destroyed in seconds. His empire's greatest armada reduced to scattered survivors. Full retreat, he whispered. Then louder, full retreat. All ships withdraw from Earth space. The surviving Valdari vessels turned and ran. They had come to conquer. Now they fled for their lives. Humanity had won the battle. But the war was far from over. The Valdari fleet ran, but they didn't run fast enough. Commander Reyes watched the enemy ships scatter across the solar system, desperate to escape the killing zone around Earth. Many were damaged, their engines failing, their shields gone. They were wounded animals fleeing from a predator. All ships pursue, Reyes ordered. Don't let them regroup. The human fleet surged forward. They had lost nearly half their ships in the battle, but they still had over 1,000 vessels against fewer than 3,000 Valdari. More importantly, they had momentum. The aliens were broken, their confidence shattered, their formation destroyed. Katie Brooks pushed her fighter to maximum speed, chasing a Valdari destroyer that was limping toward the outer planets. Her ammunition was almost gone, her shields were barely functioning, and she had been fighting for hours without rest. But she kept flying. She couldn't stop now. Not when humanity was so close to victory. Collins, you still with me? She asked over the comm. Right behind you, Brooks. Let's finish this. They caught the destroyer near Jupiter's orbit. It tried to fight back, but its weapons were damaged, its crew exhausted. Katie and Collins worked together, disabling its engines with precise shots. The massive ship drifted helplessly, unable to flee or fight. Destroyer neutralized, Katie reported. Moving to next target. All across the solar system, similar scenes played out. Human ships hunted down Valdari stragglers, destroying some, disabling others. The once mighty invasion fleet was being picked apart piece by piece, but High Commander Zethro was not finished. Despite the disaster, he still had nearly 2,000 operational ships. He gathered them near Neptune, using the planet's bulk to shield them from human sensors. He needed time to repair, to reorganize, to plan his next move. His officers argued about what to do. Some wanted to continue retreating, to leave this cursed system and return home. Others wanted revenge, a chance to make the humans pay for the humiliation they had suffered. Zethral listened to them all, his mind working furiously. "The humans surprised us once," he said finally. "They will not do so again. We know their numbers now. We know their weapons. We still have strength enough to destroy them if we fight smart." He pulled up a tactical display. "The human fleet is spread out, chasing our scattered ships. They've lost formation. If we strike now, while they're disorganized, we can defeat them in detail. Destroy them one squadron at a time." His officers exchanged glances. It was risky. Another defeat would mean the end of their careers, perhaps their lives. But staying here meant death anyway. The humans would hunt them down eventually. "We attack," Zethral decided. "Full assault. Target their flagship, Forge 1. Kill their commander, and the rest will fall apart." The Valdari fleet moved out from behind Neptune, forming into attack formation. They had learned from the battle around Earth. This time, they spread out to avoid antimatter weapons. This time, they would be ready. Commander Reyes received the warning from his scouts. The Valdari were coming back. Nearly 2,000 ships, heading straight for his position. He looked at his own fleet, scattered across millions of kilometers, still hunting enemy stragglers. He couldn't gather them in time. "All ships, defensive positions around Forge 1, he ordered. "The enemy is counterattacking." Only 300 human ships were close enough to respond. The rest were too far away, still pursuing fleeing Valdari vessels. Reyes knew he was about to face 6-1 odds. Admiral Holloway saw the situation from Earth and felt her heart sink. They had been so close to total victory. Now everything was at risk again. "We have to help them," she said. "Order all ships to break off pursuit and support Forge 1. "It will take hours for most of them to arrive," her aide replied. "The battle will be over by then." Grace closed her eyes. Daniel Reyes was out there with 300 ships against 2,000. He was going to die unless she did something. "Captain Nguyen," she said over the comm. "Do we have any antimatter weapons left?" 12 warheads, Admiral. The rest were used in the first attack. "Can you hit the Valdari fleet?" Amy hesitated. "They're spread out now. We might destroy 50, maybe 100 ships. It won't be enough." It wasn't enough. Grace stared at the tactical display, searching for an answer. There had to be something. Some way to turn the tide. Then she saw it. A crazy idea. An impossible gamble. But it was all she had. "Daniel," she said over the secure channel. "I have a plan, but you're not going to like it." Reyes listened as she explained. His face went pale, but he didn't argue. "Understood, Admiral. We'll do our part." The Valdari fleet approached Forge 1, weapons ready, revenge in their hearts. Zethral watched the human ships form a defensive line. 300 against 2,000. It was almost unfair. Almost. "All ships, attack," he commanded. The battle began again. Energy beams and railgun slugs filled the space between the fleets. Human ships fought desperately, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. One by one, they began to fall. Katie Brooks was in the thick of it. Her fighter squadron had rushed back to defend Forge 1, but there were so many enemy ships. She dodged, fired, dodged again. Her wingman Collins took a hit and exploded. She screamed his name, but kept fighting. There was nothing else she could do. Commander Reyes watched from Forge 1's bridge as his fleet died around him. The station itself was taking hits, its shields failing. He had maybe 10 minutes before the Valdari broke through. "Admiral," he said calmly, "we're out of time." "Hold on, Daniel. Just a little longer." On Earth, Grace gave the final order. "Captain Nguyen, launch everything. Target the Eternal Dominion." Amy Nguyen hesitated. "Admiral, they'll shoot down the warheads. They're too spread out. Trust me." The 12 remaining antimatter warheads launched from their platforms. They streaked toward the Valdari fleet, moving slower than they had in the first attack. Zethral saw them coming and smiled. He had learned from his mistake. "Shoot them down," he ordered. "Don't let any get through." Valdari ships turned their weapons on the incoming warheads. One by one, they were destroyed. The aliens cheered. The human secret weapon was useless now, but the warheads weren't the real attack. While the Valdari were focused on the antimatter weapons, something else was happening. Admiral Holloway had ordered every satellite in Earth orbit to redirect their solar power collectors. Thousands of mirrors turned toward the Valdari fleet, focusing sunlight into concentrated beams. The beams weren't powerful enough to destroy ships, but they were bright enough to blind sensors. The Valdari fleet was suddenly flying blind. Their screens filled with static. Their targeting computers failed. They couldn't see the enemy anymore, and in that moment of confusion, the rest of the human fleet arrived. They had been racing toward Forge 1 at maximum speed, every engine pushed beyond safe limits. 700 ships burst out of the blinding light, weapons blazing. They caught the Valdari completely off guard. The battle turned in an instant. Blind and confused, the Valdari couldn't coordinate their defense. Human ships tore into them, destroying dozens before they could react. Zethral realized what had happened. He had been tricked again. The antimatter warheads were a distraction. The human commander had used them to draw his attention while setting up the real attack. "Fall back," he screamed. "All ships, fall back." But it was too late. The human fleet had the advantage now. They pressed their attack, driving the Valdari back toward the outer planets. The aliens tried to reform, but every time they gathered strength, human ships appeared to scatter them again. Katie Brooks flew until her fuel ran out, then drifted in her powerless cockpit, watching the battle continue without her. She thought about Collins, about all the pilots who had died today. She thought about Earth, still spinning below, safe because of their sacrifice. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." The Valdari fleet was broken beyond repair. Fewer than 1,000 ships remained, and they were running as fast as they could toward the edge of the solar system. The invasion was over, but High Commander Zethral was still alive. And he still had his flagship. Admiral Holloway looked at the tactical display. One more task remained. "Commander Reyes," she said, "capture the Eternal Dominion. I want to speak with their commander personally." The Eternal Dominion drifted near Jupiter's great red eye, its engines dead, its weapons silent. The flagship of the Valdari invasion fleet was now a crippled hulk, surrounded by human warships that waited like sharks around wounded prey. High Commander Zethral stood on his bridge, watching the enemy vessels through the main viewport. His crew was silent, defeated, waiting for death or capture. They had come to Earth as conquerors. Now they were prisoners. A communication signal came through. Zethral hesitated, then accepted it. A human face appeared on screen. A woman with gray hair and cold eyes. She wore a military uniform and carried herself with the confidence of a leader. "I am Admiral Grace Holloway of Earth's Defense Force," she said. "You are High Commander Zethral, I presume?" Zethral nodded slowly. "You have one human. What do you want?" "I want you to listen. And then I want you to deliver a message." The Admiral leaned forward. Her voice was calm, but Zethral heard the steel beneath the words. 12 hours ago, your fleet surrounded my world. You demanded our surrender. You called us primitive. You thought we would kneel before your power and accept slavery." She paused. "You were wrong. On Earth, billions of people watched the transmission. It was being broadcast across every channel, every network, every screen on the planet. They saw their admiral face the alien commander, and they held their breath. Your empire has conquered 17 star systems," Grace continued. "You believed Earth would be the 18th. Instead, your fleet has been destroyed. Your invasion has failed. And now you must return to your masters with news of what happened here." Zethral's face twisted with humiliation. "You want me to be your messenger? To carry word of your victory?" "Yes, because the message is not just for you. It is for everyone in the galaxy who might think of threatening Earth." Grace stood up straighter. Behind her, through the windows of the Pentagon bunker, the sun was rising over Washington. A new day was beginning. "We are humanity," she said. "We do not surrender. We do not submit. We do not kneel. For 50 years, we hid our strength, waiting, preparing, building. We let you think we were weak because we knew that someday, someone would come. Someday, someone would try to conquer us. And we wanted to be ready." She pointed at the screen, at Zethral, at everything he represented. "We were ready. Your 12,000 ships are gone. Your invasion force is destroyed. You came to enslave us, and instead, you have learned the truth about humanity. We fight. We never give up. And we will do whatever it takes to protect our home." Commander Reyes watched from Forge 1, a smile on his tired face. Around him, his surviving crew stood at attention, listening to their admiral speak for all of them. "Take your remaining ships and go," Grace said. "Return to your empire. Tell them what you witnessed today. Tell them that Earth is not a world to be conquered. It is a warning. Any species that threatens humanity will face the same fate. We will find you. We will fight you. And we will win." She paused, letting the words sink in. "But know this as well. We did not want this war. We did not seek this battle. We built our fleet in hope that we would never need to use it. If you come to us in peace, you will find friends. If you come to trade and learn and grow together, you will find partners. But if you come with weapons and demands and dreams of conquest, you will find only death." Zethral was silent for a long moment. His hands shook slightly. He had lived his entire life believing in the superiority of the Voldari Empire. Now that belief lay shattered at his feet. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why did you hide? Why pretend to be weak?" Grace smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Because we know the galaxy is dangerous. We received a message, long ago, from another species. They warned us about empires like yours. They told us to hide until we were strong enough to defend ourselves. We listened. Another species helped you? They tried to help themselves too. Your empire destroyed them centuries ago. But their final message saved us. Their sacrifice gave humanity a chance to survive." Zethral looked down at his hands. Somewhere in the Voldari archives, there were records of that conquest. A minor species, barely worth remembering. He had never imagined that their last act of defiance would lead to this. "I will deliver your message," he said quietly. "But you should know that my empire will not accept this defeat. They will come again. With more ships. With new weapons. They will not stop until Earth is destroyed. Then they will fail again." Grace's voice was absolute. "And again. And again. However many times they come, we will be waiting. We will be ready. And we will win." The transmission ended. Zethral turned away from the screen and looked at his surviving officers. There were fewer than 50 left on the bridge. fewer than 1,000 in the entire surviving fleet. "Repair what you can," he ordered. "We're going home." On Earth, the celebrations began. In every city, on every continent, people poured into the streets. They had faced extinction and survived. They had fought against impossible odds and won. The sky was no longer dark with enemy ships. The stars had returned. Katie Brooks was recovered by a rescue shuttle and brought back to Earth. She landed at a military base in Texas, where crowds of people waited to cheer for the heroes who had saved them. She walked down the ramp on shaking legs, still wearing her flight suit, still smelling of sweat and fear and battle. A little girl broke through the crowd and ran to her. She held up a drawing of a fighter plane with hearts around it. "You're a hero," she said. "You saved us." Katie knelt down and hugged the child. Tears streamed down her face. She thought about Collins and all the others who had died. They should be here too. They should be the ones receiving thanks. "We all saved each other," she whispered. "That's what humans do." In the following weeks, the world changed. The nations of Earth began working together in ways they never had before. Old conflicts seemed small compared to the threat from the stars. Old grudges faded in the light of shared survival. New shipyards were built, no longer hidden but open for all to see. The surviving fleet was expanded, upgraded, improved. Human scientists studied captured Valdari technology and began to unlock its secrets. Within months, they had developed shields and engines that matched anything the aliens possessed. Admiral Holloway became the head of the newly formed Earth Defense Council. She oversaw the construction of orbital fortresses, the training of new crews, the development of weapons that would protect humanity for generations to come. She never forgot the lesson of the invasion. Strength was the only language the galaxy understood. Commander Reyes returned to Forge One, now the headquarters of Earth's fleet. He promoted Katie Brooks to captain and gave her command of a new ship, the USS Resilience. She accepted with pride and sorrow, knowing that every mission she flew would honor the memory of those who had fallen. And in the depths of space, High Commander Zethral carried his message back to the Valdari Empire. He told them of humanity's hidden fleet, their devastating weapons, their unbreakable will to survive. He told them of the defeat that had destroyed their greatest armada. The Empire's rulers listened. They argued. They planned. Some wanted revenge. Others counseled caution. But they all understood one thing. Earth was no longer prey. It was a predator, perhaps the most dangerous one the galaxy had ever seen. The first battle was over. Humanity had announced itself to the universe with fire and fury. The galaxy would never forget the day a primitive species rose from the shadows and crushed an empire. Other species heard the story. Some were afraid. Some were intrigued. Some began to wonder if humanity might be the ally they had always needed, the shield against the Valdari and others like them. Messages began arriving at Earth. Offers of trade. Requests for friendship. Warnings about other dangers in the darkness between stars. Humanity answered them all. They had hidden for 50 years, but now they were ready to take their place among the stars. They would make friends where they could and enemies where they must. They would explore and discover and grow, but they would never forget the lesson of the invasion. They would never lower their guard. They would never stop building their strength because the galaxy was dangerous. And humanity intended to survive. The stars were no longer something to fear. They were something to reach for, to claim, to call home. And somewhere, on a quiet evening in Washington, Admiral Grace Holloway sat with her daughter on their porch and looked up at the night sky. The stars were bright and clear, more beautiful than ever before. "What happens now, Mom?" her daughter asked. Grace smiled and put her arm around her. Now we go out there. And we show them who we are. The future was waiting, and humanity was ready to meet it.